Around the country, they know me as George's boy and George's brother, right? I mean, that's generally, it's not nothing. I'm proud of my family, but I'm not going to get elected by being the third Bush running for president. I got that. I got enough self-awareness to know that that's the case. I got to go earn it.
Jeb Bush speaking about his brother, and now reports he may be having a little bit of a change of heart on the role of his brother in his campaign. As the former Florida governor struggles to connect with some Republicans, his campaign is exploring whether to bring in his brother, George W. Bush. While the former president is popular with some of the conservative base, it could also backfire with other voters. So what to do? Karl Rove, former senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, joins us now on this. So, Karl, so far, President George W. Bush has done some private fundraising for his brother Jeb. Do you think we will see a more public role, and why would we now?
Well, I doubt that we will. I want to correct you. It's not the Bush campaign, the Jeb Bush campaign, that is exploring this. The story in the New York Times emanates from a couple of longtime supporters of President Bush 43, Barry Wynn, who was 43's campaign finance chairman in 1999 and 2000 in South Carolina, and Sally Atwater, the widow of Lee Atwater, very close friend of 43s and 41s, and it was their suggestion to the New York Times reporter Jonathan Martin that 43 ought to come in and campaign in South Carolina because he's enormously popular.
Yes, and that's why we said reports, which I thank you for correcting us on it, but I was going to get to the point of South Carolina in just a moment. But in general, do you think where Jeb Bush is in the polls that perhaps there is going to be a change of strategy and more members of his family will come forward? Will that be helpful?
I doubt it. First of all, we're very early, as we heard in the last segment talking about the Democrats. We're very early in the latest NBC Marist polls. There's been movement for Bush in both New Hampshire and Iowa. We're likely to see the polls gyrate all over the place, and I think the well-meaning gesture of two longtime supporters of President Bush 43 should not be, too much read into it. My suspicion is President Bush 43 is very comfortable doing what he has done, which is behind the scenes helping at some fundraising events and leaving the field open for his brother. He's been very circumspect since he left office. He thinks that was the best way to help the country heal. He believes that history will be fair in its judgment on what he did while he was in office, but I don't think that it's that either he or his brother's campaign managers or his brother are particularly focused on getting him to jump out there and campaign, go door to door. I've been through this before. We had enormous pressure in 1999 and 2000 to get the most popular Republican alive in America at that time, Barbara Bush, and along with her husband, George H.W. Bush, to campaign. We ultimately did at one point in New Hampshire. I'm not certain how wise we were in putting them out there in the final days of a primary. People make up their minds, not on the basis strictly of who your parents are and who your brother is, but who you are and what you're talking about.
We get your point that it's early and that the polling is early, and we all know it's very early in the campaigns. But as each day goes by, and you do see the average of the polling, and Jeb Bush being not in the top three, and granted, those top three often change as we get closer to the final days of deciding who is the candidate. What is Jeb Bush's pitch to fundraisers, to donors, to say, hey, continue to give me money because I'm going to stay in this race and I'm going to be the most relevant candidate?
Well, looking at what he is saying in both his advertising and on the stump, if you've seen them in the last couple of weeks, he's pushing very hard that he was a conservative governor of Florida who took on the powers that be in Tallahassee, whether they were the teacher unions or the big spenders in government or the bureaucrats, and that he was a guy who cut taxes, reformed the schools with charter schools left and right, cut spending every year that he was there, reduced the number of total number of state government employees.
That may all be true, but his numbers are down, Karl, at this moment. And for people that are short-term, for short-term, they're going to be looking at where to put their money and whether or not to continue to put it there. So is that enough? Jenna, we'll see. But here's the thing. You could have made the same argument at the same point in 2011 about a guy who was fourth and fifth at times in the polls. His name was Mitt Romney, and he won the nomination. You could have said these things about in 2007 about the third or fourth place person in a much smaller field, a guy named John McCain. They went on to win the nomination. Think about this. We are as far from the beginning of the Iowa caucus
caucuses as we would be from the November general election if this were the early July. There's a long time to go. Jeb Bush has a terrific record that he's trying to put attention on, and he's got the resources. That's not to say he's going to win or that he's the absolute winner, but he is going to be competitive, and anybody who counts any one of these significant players, whether it's Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or John Kasich or Carly Fiorina or Ben Carson or Donald Trump out at this point, is going way over the line. And we got plenty of gyrations to go in this contest.
And that's why we're talking about all the candidates today. And so you feel like there's nothing to the report in the New York Times about George W. coming forward, and you feel that the money's going to stay there. So that's where it is today, and that's fine.
Well, no, I think there is something to the report of the New York Times that Barry Wynn and Sally Atwater would love to have their friend George Bush
and Barbara
George
Bush.
W.
They
Bush,
also
43,
mentioned
come into South Carolina, but I would not make more of it than Barry Wynn and Sally Atwater, who both of whom are friends of mine. And Jonathan Martin made a story out of a little, and let's not make too much of it.
Okay, Carl, thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Jenna.